It may be a brand new year, but some things never change. And you all know what that means. With another level completed, another guide gets created. How's everybody doing today? My name's Professor Scalar, and I'm here to give you all the details you need to make your runs through R4C2 a bit more manageable, whether you're just sticking with the main objective or going for prisoner efficiency. Buckle up and bring those hammers with you because we've got quite a bit of work on our hands this time. For this level, I would highly recommend a bio-tracker, a mine deployer, and 2 sentries of your choice. I would probably default to an auto sentry and then a sniper or burst sentry as my second one. This loadout applies both to people who are doing just the main objective and those who are going for prisoner efficiency, and I really wouldn't change up anything no matter what I'm doing. The C-foam launcher isn't really that useful in this level, and the few points where it could be useful you can easily replace with a C-foam grenade or 2. So I wouldn't stress out too much about trying to fit that into the loadout. And I know some of you don't like taking a bio tracker unless if you absolutely need it and it's actually a necessity in that level. So for those of you who have that mentality, this is going to be one of those levels you really want to bring it. If you're going for just the main objective, you can maybe get away without it. But if you're going for the extreme and the overload objective, I would dare say the bio tracker is a necessity if you want to beat it. So do make sure you're bringing one of those along if you're going for prisoner efficiency. The main objective for this level is to collect 15 out of 20 GLPs, and they can be found anywhere from Zone 8 to Zone 15, so 8 different zones you can go to. Now, you're going to start off the level in Zone 7, and before you even start collecting items, collecting resources, killing enemies, anything like that, you want to make your way to the northwest corner of the room and check the terminal there because you might be restarting your run a few times. Of those 8 zones you can go to for GLPs, you do not want to touch 9, 13, or 15 whatsoever. Those zones are very difficult to get into, or they are very difficult to navigate through and actually survive in, and have many moments where you can easily make just one tiny mistake and your run is going to come to an end. So if you can avoid them completely, that's a good run, and it's not very difficult to get it to align that way either. You might have to restart 2 or 3 times, but this won't be a 1 in 10 chance we have to restart 10 or 20 times to get it to happen. It might actually happen on your very first try. Now, the other thing you want to check too, if you are doing the extreme objective, if you're just going the main objective, this doesn't apply, but the extreme objective requires you to collect 2 personal IDs, and those can be located in Zone 55 and or Zone 56. They can either be split in between the 2 zones or they can both be in the same zone. You want to check Zone 55 and 56 for IDs and make sure both of them are in the same zone. This will make it so you don't have to do an extra surge alarm, and the surge alarm you do have to do afterwards for the overload objective can be a little bit easier to deal with. So ideally, when you load into this level, go to the terminal, check Zone 8 through 15 for every single GLP, and if you don't have to go to 9, 13, or 15 at all, then check Zone 55 and 56 for IDs. If they're both in the same zone, that is a good run, that's your ideal run, and you want to stick with it. If that is not the situation, return back to lobby, load back in, and then check again until you get it to line up properly. At worst, you'll spend an extra 10 minutes trying to get this to happen, but it will make the run much easier, and I do highly recommend it if you're struggling with this level. Now, once you have the ideal location for all of your GLPs and your IDs, you can actually get started with tackling this level. In Zone 7, you're going to find 3 security doors. One to the west, which leads to Zone 10, this is a Class 4 alarm door. One to the north, which leads to Zone 8, this is a key card door. And one to the east, that leads to Zone 14, this is a blood door. Normally, you would want to do the alarm door first, that way you don't have multiple spawn locations and you can more easily funnel enemies. But that's not the situation with this place. The thing is, Zone 7 only has the 2 rooms, the big donut main room that you're in, and the room that you dropped into in the first place. If you do the alarm door first, enemies are going to only spawn 1 room away from you in your spawn point, and to make things even worse, the scans for this alarm door like to go near the spawn point, so you're going to have enemies spawning in only a few seconds away from you. To make things a bit easier, you're going to want to do the blood door to Zone 14 first, that way you can open up a valid 2 room away spawn and enemies will only spawn back there and not super close to you. Once you have finished the blood door that leads to zone 14, you're going to want to step in and then shoot and then run back out. Enemies might not have been set off from that room, and you're going to want to set them all off because you may notice that the entire bottom floor of that room is covered in infectious fog. You only have that little platform that you stand on at the beginning that isn't in the fog. Now, you are given a ton of fog repellers in Zone 7, enough to the point where everybody can easily carry 3 or 4 and then still probably go back and collect a few more stacks. But you don't want to use them to clear out this zone. Rather, shoot, bait the enemies out, kill them all. Then you're going to want to throw the fog repellers down, sort of as you can see in the background footage here, and you're going to want to place down a few mines. There are 2 doors connected to this room, and the enemies from the alarm door are going to spawn behind both of these doors. So you're going to want to place a mine on both of them, and then you can also place a few mines down the hallway a bit to deal with even more enemies. Not really necessary, this is more so because we only had 2 of us, you have 4 people, so it'll be easier to deal with, but hey, more mines never did hurt. Once you've placed down all the mines, you then want to get out of that zone. You'll come back to zone 14 later so you can further explore it once you actually get a fog turbine. Your turrets I would recommend either keep with you near the scans, since the scans like to go all over the zone, or you could place them near the entrance to the blood door to shoot enemies as they come out of it. Once you have all that preparation set though, you can then go do the alarm door that leads to zone 10. Once you have bested the class 4 alarm that leads to zone 10, you can head in, collect some GLPs, collect some resources, kill enemies, the classic, and then you're going to notice you have 3 security doors you can go to. Zone 11, Zone 12, and Zone 13. 13 is one of the ones I recommend you do not go into unless you just really want the challenge of it or you just want to test your limits. So I'll talk more about that one, how you get into it, how you deal with it later once I finish talking about the ideal route. So you're left with Zone 11 or 12. Zone 12 is a class 4 alarm door and Zone 11 is just a basic security door. So if you're not doing too hot on resources or if you think you need more before you do a class 4 alarm, go into Zone 11 first. Inside of there, you're going to find 1, potentially 2 scouts, you'll find quite a few enemies, but more importantly, you're going to find more GLPs, a bulkhead door control, a bulkhead door that leads to your extreme objective, and a fog turbine. You're going to want to bring this fog turbine with you because now you can go back to Zone 14 and actually clear out that fog infested zone. In there though, you're going to probably find quite a few more enemies you have to deal with. If this is a situation and things are looking a bit too dicey to stealthily clear out, I recommend make a trail with the fog repellers, then just walk in, shoot, and then run out really quickly. That way you don't have to run out holding a fog turbine, and just kill the enemies out in the open in Zone 7. Throughout Zone 14 though, you'll find some more resources, and at the far back you're going to find a security door that leads to Zone 15. This is another zone I do not recommend you touch, so we'll come back to this at a later point. Once you've collected everything you need from 14 though, you can head back to Zone 10 as it's now time to tackle the Class 4 alarm that leads to Zone 12. The security door to Zone 12 just says alarm detected, but it's no big deal. This is just a typical Class 4 alarm door that spawns in regular enemies, no chargers, hybrids, or any special type of enemy with this one. As you can see with the map overlay, there are 3 different doors that they can come through to get to you. There is a room divider in the middle of this room, so don't let that throw you off. But these 2 doors here are connected to the same room. So for them, it just depends on which door they spawn closer to will be the one they take, and then every wave afterwards will take that one since the open door will be faster than the closed door. The other door over here though, this is a separate room, so if they spawn back here, they will always come through this door no matter what. Now, if you're doing my ideal loadout, you only have 2 turrets, so I wouldn't recommend placing your turrets behind those doors. Instead, keep them in the middle of the room with you, that way they can shoot enemies as they approach, and that way you're not guessing which door they might come from. Although do place a mine on all of the doors since you can pick those up anyway. Now Zone 12 itself is quite a bit more deadly than the alarm that you need to go through to get into it. Zone 12 is considered a required zone because of how many key items it has. In Zone 12 you will always find the bulkhead key that you need for the extreme objective, you'll find a colored key card which you need to get into Zone 8, and you're also going to find quite a few GLPs and resources. But all of these goodies are defended by some pretty powerful enemies. Inside the zone you're going to find quite a few chargers, some regular enemies as well, but most importantly you're going to find a birther, and you need to be careful of her. Normally you can identify when a birther is in a level because of the sound she makes is pretty unique, but that sound effect is the same as the charger sound effect, or it's very similar to it. So make sure you don't accidentally walk around a corner getting ready to bonk what you think is a charger, only to end up bonking a birther and waking the thing up, because that is definitely going to bring your run to an end unless you got the resources to handle it. Now, you may get lucky and the birther will be in a room that you don't have to go into, or you can just sneak past her and you don't have to worry about her. Or you'll get unlucky, because let's be honest, when are we ever lucky in GTFO? And you're going to find a locker with a padlock that has 2 GLPs in it that's right next to her, and you have no lock melters at all. If you have to kill her, it's not a big deal. Use a C-foam grenade if you have one. If you don't, just make sure all 4 people are ready, the entire room is cleared out so it's only her, and then just go to town shooting the tumors, coordinate, make sure you're not all shooting at the same tumors, and you could probably kill her before she gives birth. Just be very careful not to set off any of these rooms though, because a lot of them are quite big, and if you set off an enemy at the very beginning of the room, there might be a birther at the far end of it that also gets woken up too. So just be a bit cautious going through here. Once you have finished Zone 12 though, you can head back to Zone 7 because you now have the key card you need to go into Zone 8, which is the final zone you're going to need to go into to collect GLPs. The security door to Zone 8 is just a basic scan sequence, no alarm, you just need to make sure you have that key card on you from Zone 12. Zone 8 itself though is a little bit dangerous, but you can also avoid most of it. This zone will primarily have big strikers, big shooters, and sleeping hybrids. And some of the rooms are quite big, so if you set an enemy off in a big room and you shoot or something, you're gonna have so many big enemies on you with a ton of HP that you're gonna pretty much lose all of your ammunition if you're not careful. But you don't have to kill everything. There is no alarm door connected to the zone. I would highly recommend you clear out the entire first room, but that room usually only has 2 or 3 enemies in it anyway. So if you need to, just stealth your entire way through this zone. There is a security door at the very back end of it that leads to Zone 9. That is another basic security scan sequence, but again, we're going to talk about that later. That's the third zone that I recommend you do not touch. Once you've collected every single GLP from Zone 8, if you have followed the ideal path and you did set it up so everything is in the right location, that should be the final GLP you need, and you can now extract the level if you want to. Now, the extraction scan is an active one, so when you step on it, you're going to have waves of enemies coming after you. However, they're all going to spawn so far away from you, you'll probably get to about 50 to 70% on the scan before they even show up, so it's really not too difficult to defend against. If this is the ending of the level for you, then congratulations, you've now beaten R4C2. However, if you have more you want to do, and you want to do the extreme objective and stuff, there's quite a bit more we need to talk about. But before we get into the extreme objective, let's actually talk about Zone 9, 13, and 15, and I can explain why I say you shouldn't touch them, and how you can deal with them if you do decide to touch them. Zone 9 is connected to Zone 8, and it's really not too bad to get into, it's just a basic security scan. However, Zone 9 can best be described as a pitch black maze of death and destruction. This zone is pitch black and has tons of enemies, strikers, shooters, big shooters, hybrids, and even scouts throughout it. It's a bunch of winding tunnels, multiple floors, so you don't know if enemies are above you, below you, the same room as you. Even with a biotracker, it's very difficult to navigate your way through it. And if you set off enemies at any point, you're going to have one heck of a gunfight on you because you're going to be trying to kill enemies that you cannot see very easily. And things just get nasty very quickly. It's not too bad of a zone to go through if you know how to navigate through the dark and you're confident in that. And it's pretty easy to get into, but I still don't recommend it because I've seen many people lose to this zone just because of how difficult it can be to navigate. Zone 13 though is probably the worst one of the bunch. The security door to Zone 13 can be found in Zone 10 on the northern end of it, and it's just a Class 3 alarm. And there's only one entrance to the room. As you can see with the floor plan, it looks pretty simple to deal with, doesn't it? The issue with it though is the fact that the scan is very trolly and very difficult to deal with. This room has basically 2 floors. The above floor where the catwalks are and the door is, and down below where all the infectious fog is. The scans love to go down there. You'll do the full team scan by the door, then the first set of scans is going to go all the way down there, then the third set's going to come all the way back up, go near the door, and then go all the way back down again. It's very trolly. You either need about 7 or 8 fog repellers to thoroughly repel all the fog in that room, and even then they might start running out as you're finishing the third wave of scans. And even if you C-foam the door once, the enemies tend to get in there before the second wave of scans even appear on the floor. So it can be pretty difficult to deal with, and you're probably going to gain a lot of infection. Yes, you have a fog turbine that can make it a bit easier, but even then I don't really recommend it. And that's not even the worst part of it. Zone 13 itself has 5 or 6 scouts in it, and they all like to be in the same room very close to each other. If you set off even one of those, that's about 12 enemies per scout, so you're looking, worst case scenario, over 70 enemies that are not all going to spawn at the same time, thankfully, but they will spawn wave after wave, and it's a nightmare to deal with. If you're very confident in scout killing, even killing scouts that are very close to each other and actually being good at splitting them apart and being able to kill them without setting off the rest, go for it. This zone isn't that bad if you know how to do that. But if you're not confident in your scout kills or you're just sort of iffy with it, I wouldn't recommend touching this, as you're going to lose a lot of resources just getting in here, and even more just surviving when you F it up eventually. Now, the other thing is, in Zone 13 there's a power cell, and that power cell is required to get into Zone 15, the third zone I don't recommend you go into. And that's one of the reasons why. You need to go into 13 to get the power cell to even get into 15. Then to make it even worse, yeah, it's just a basic security door, so easy to get in. But Zone 15 is completely covered in infectious fog, has a ton of small rooms, a ton of big rooms, enemies out the wazoo, a scout, maybe even 2, a ton of big enemies. It's a nightmare to deal with. It's basically Zone 9, but this time instead of pitch black darkness, it's just fog and nothing but fog. And dealing with that is really not that easy to deal with, because hey, you may see one enemy near you, you kill it, and then an enemy halfway across the room you couldn't see is glowing, and it wakes up because it sees the enemy you just killed. Now you got an awake room and you have nothing to deal with it. It's not a fun zone, and that's why I don't recommend you touch these 3. You can get away without touching these 3, and by far they are the worst, the most deadly, and I've seen so many runs come to an end because of them. So pardon the little rant I had there, but if you want an easy run, don't touch these 3. Even though I taught you how to, unless if you are very confident and you want the challenge, stick to the other 5, it will make life so much easier. But now that we've talked about those 3 zones, and I've talked about everything else, let's get on to the extreme objective and start talking about how you can deal with all of that. Back in Zone 11, you'll find the bulkhead door that will lead you to Zone 53, and this is a Class 3 alarm. As you can see, there's only one door they can come through. Again, there's a room divider in here, so don't let that throw you off. That little side room that's next to the door, I recommend you keep that door open. Enemies can't spawn back there, but just don't use that as a defense point during this alarm because you're going to want to save that door for later. Zone 53 itself is pretty annoying to deal with though. It's a long rectangular room with some walkways up above and down below, a ton of enemies, and 2 to 3 scouts. Now you might get lucky and enemies are spread out far apart enough from each other that you can silently kill every single one of them without waking up other enemies, or you may get super unlucky and almost every enemy spawns near the entrance of the bulkhead door and the scouts decide to just stay up there the entire time because that's pretty much where every single enemy is. At that point there's really not much you can do. You're playing a huge game of red light green light with the enemies, trying to move inch by inch just to get in a position to kill, and meanwhile you have a scout that's really close to you that's going to try to touch you with its tentacles. If you do get super unlucky and you just can't find a way to silently kill pretty much anything, use a gun or just rush the scout and melee it, that way you at least get rid of one of them. But it's really up to RNG. Sometimes you'll get lucky and you can deal with it, other times you're in a position where you literally cannot kill them all silently and you have to wake up the room. The security door to Zone 54 is an alarm type that you probably haven't seen before, and I don't blame you, because this alarm door only came up in one level in the past, and that was R2E1. This is the surge alarm. A surge alarm is pretty similar to a Class 3 alarm door with just a few key differences. First of all, every single scan is going to be a full team scan, so you got 3 full team scans you have to do. Second of all, the enemies that spawn from it will only be regular strikers. You will not get shooters, big enemies, hybrids, chargers, anything like that. It will just be regular strikers. And third, enemies don't spawn in waves, but instead spawn constantly. The enemy cap in this game is 25 when it comes to alarm doors, so the game is going to spawn in pretty much 25 enemies within just a few seconds, and every time you kill an enemy or 2, it will respawn it within a few seconds. So you're going to have quite a few enemies you have to kill. You can't exactly kill a wave and then get a breather, because the next wave's already going to be coming after you. There are 2 main ways you can handle surge alarms. You can either kite enemies and not place down mines, turrets, or anything like that, and just purely run, kite enemies, maybe shove them a little bit, and then finish all the scans, and then when all the scans are finished, then kill enemies. This is usually a preferred route as you save pretty much all of your ammo and your tool refill. Or, depending on the room position, the layouts and stuff, or if your team just isn't confident in kiting, you can barricade doors, seafoam them, place down mines, place down turrets, anything to keep enemies away from you, and that way you can finish all 3 of the scans without having to run around the room over and over again. It really depends on the layout of the level, and it depends on how confident your group is in kiting. The better option is usually to kite, just because you will be saving a lot of resources in the long run, but again, it's up to you and your team. Just discuss it, and if somebody on your team isn't good at kiting, don't pressure them, don't try to force them, because if they go down, you have to revive them before you can continue doing the scans, which is just going to be a huge mess. Now when it comes to this surge alarm in particular, let's look at the floor plan. As you can see, there are only 2 spawn locations that they could be in. If they spawn in that southeasternmost spawn, there's no doors you could shut. However, that other side door, that one you can shut, and that's why I said you should keep it open until this point to ensure it doesn't get broken. If they spawn back there, they are much closer, but you could shut the door, seafoam it if you have seafoam, place mines on it, and anything like that, and it will make it so that it takes a lot longer for enemies to get to you. If you do want to place down your turrets, I recommend placing them down in or inside the zone you're in, facing towards the bulkhead door. That way it shoots them as they come through that choke point. These scans aren't too bad, as most of them will just spawn next to the security door. Maybe 1 or 2 of them will spawn down beneath, but it's pretty quick to finish this one, so don't worry too much about it. I'd worry more so about the next room, because you're going to have to deal with a few more surge alarms, along with a new type of threat. Heading into zone 54, you're going to see probably 1 or 2 scouts off in the distance, and that's about all you're going to see. Except for the person with the biotracker, who's going to be seeing a lot of white dots throughout the room. These white dots are a returning enemy from Rundown 2 known as Shadows. They are just like regular strikers, their stats are almost the exact same across the board. However, instead of actually seeing a body, you will see a shadowy silhouette of their body, and even then, it's very difficult to see their silhouette. You can more easily see it if you use flashlights, especially higher power, brighter like white flashlights, or like the long range flashlight. However, keep in mind, shining a light on them for too long, they're gonna wake up and get mad at you, so do be cautious with it. The biotracker has an easier time dealing with them because he can see the white dots and you know approximately where they are, how many are close to each other, and how to go about it. You know how far you can scooch forward before you accidentally bump it. The rest of you, not so much, so you're going to probably want to practice your scout or your shadow spawning skills in this room. The best way to deal with it is to just sort of stutter step. Keep stutter stepping until you hear enemies reacting a little bit. You know, especially if you hear a throb. If you hear a throb, you know an enemy has a line of sight of you, and you need to be careful. Then shine your light in a direction. If you think you hear an enemy from the left of you, look to the left of you and shine your light and then turn it off immediately. That will cause it to sort of start throbbing a little bit and you'll hear that deep throb. If you don't hear it, then that probably means you didn't shine it in the right direction. Keep doing that until you get a general idea of what area that shadow is in. Then inch your way closer and then use your light. Eventually, once you get close enough, you'll be able to see the silhouette quite a bit easier with the flashlight, and you'll know exactly where it's standing, what position it's in, and the best way to hit it. Just be careful that there are no other shadows near the one you're about to hit so you don't accidentally wake up other enemies. Now, the other thing about shadows is that they don't work the same when it comes to the biotracker and turrets. Shadows will not be shot at by any of the turrets unless there's a biotracker ping on top of them. And that biotracker ping doesn't last for very long, it's only a few seconds. As a matter of fact, the biotracker ping, it goes away before the biotracker actually comes off a cooldown, so you can't even keep those things perma-tagged. So you need to make sure that if you're using the biotracker, your tags are on point, you're getting as many of them as you can, and your team is making sure you kill them before those tags disappear. Take this room slow, communicate with your team, and if you're not comfortable, stay near your biotracker person and just let them take the lead. Just be careful of the 2 scouts that are in the zone and make sure you don't accidentally touch their tentacle, because you don't need that entire room of scout or shadows being set off, as well as a new wave or 2 of enemies spawning in from behind you. Now, once you clear out this entire zone, you're going to notice you have a few options here. You have an overload bulkhead door, which you will have the door controller in that room, and you will also have the key either in that room or zone 53, the previous one, and you're going to have a security door that leads to zone 55 and 56. And there's a lot you can do in this zone, so pardon me, but there's quite a bit that you and I need to quickly discuss here. There are many different ways to proceed with how you want to go from out here. So you have two security doors, 55 and 56. They both have surge alarms, and you have an overload bulkhead door that also has a surge alarm on it. Let's look at a floor plan just so you know what it's going to look like, assuming all three doors are shut, or really what it's going to look like for your first surge alarm. As you can see, enemies are going to spawn pretty far away, and you're going to have quite a bit of time to actually finish the surge alarm before enemies get towards you, especially if you place turrets at the entrance to the zone. That way it shoots enemies as they try to come in. So you've got a pretty decent amount of time, and this first surge alarm won't be too terribly bad, unless you get really bad RNG with where the scans spawn and it decides to take you all over the room for every single scan. Now, I said that you should try to make it so both IDs are in the same zone. This will make it a lot easier because you only have to do 55 or 56, you don't have to do both of them. But if you do end up having to do both of them, then there's different ways you can approach it. You could just do every single surge alarm back to back. If you have a ton of resources and you're confident in your team's skill, you could go for that. This will guarantee that the spawns are always to the south, and it's going to take a lot longer for them to get to you, and it might make these surge alarms quite a bit easier. But if you're not as confident, or if you're running low on resources, you can go into the zones and collect the resources in there before the next surge alarm. Just keep in mind that if you do that, there's a much closer spawn point for you. Granted though, these zones do have doors in them that you can shut, and shutting those doors can make things quite a bit easier for you and buy you more time. But again, it's up to you and your team and what your team's most comfortable with. Personally, I find that the easiest way to do this is just make sure both IDs are in the same zone, do that surge alarm first, go into that zone, collect all the resources, shut the door, place some mines on them, maybe some turrets, then go do the overload surge alarm. And it makes life quite a bit easier. Yes, they could spawn closer to you, but the mines and the turrets and the door will buy you quite a bit of time, and then your gun skills and just your team blasting enemies should keep it safe. Just don't be afraid to kite around the room and take enemies on a bit of a journey if you really need to. But once you've completed the extreme objective, you have both your IDs, and you've opened up the overload bulkhead door, you can then head into zone 241 and get started on the overload objective. To end off this level, you have one heck of an objective you have to do. The overload objective is to collect and extract with a corrupted data sphere, just like the one in R4C1, so something you're going to have to physically carry on you. Now, zone 241 is pitch black as all heck. Starting to notice a little bit of a theme with these more recent levels? Yeah, I am too. Inside 241, not only do you have to deal with the pitch black darkness, you also have to deal with spitters. This is the only place where spitters can be. They're not too dangerous, just make sure they're not chipping away at your health needlessly, because you're going to need every bit of health that you can manage at this point. Throughout this zone, the only type of enemies you're going to see are shadow strikers and shadow scouts.
Sweet Jesus!
Yep. 10 Chambers made the meme a reality. They finally pulled the trigger and made Shadow Scouts a real thing. And my gosh, they are a nightmare to deal with if you don't know what you're doing. I've already explained Shadow Strikers and how to deal with them, so I don't need to touch on that. Shadow Scouts, on the other hand, are a different story. They work just like their Scout counterparts. They walk around, they extend their tentacles every once in a while. Their bodies have the shadowy look, but their tentacles are normal. You can very easily see their tentacles even in the darkness. If you set off a Shadow Scout though, it will only spawn in regular enemies. It will not spawn in shadows, just regular strikers and shooters. However, Shadow Scouts spawn in pairs, usually pairs of 2 or 4. You will not find a room that only has one Shadow Scout in it. If you're lucky, you'll find 2. If you're unlucky, you're going to find 4 Shadow Scouts in the same room, filled with quite a few shadows. Again, BioTracker is going to come in handy here, and your BioTracker needs to be attentive. They need to tell you where shadows are, they need to be giving callouts, and people need to listen to the dude with the BioTracker and make sure they're not interrupting or talking over them. Otherwise, you're probably going to be setting off quite a few enemies. If you do set off a room, I highly recommend it completely retreat out of that zone and go back into a better lit zone. That way you can sort of see the shadowy silhouettes on the floor when they come after you, and you know approximately where to shoot. Going through zone 241, you're going to want to be very careful. There are going to be a lot of Shadow Scouts. I've had a few runs where there are only 6, and I've had some runs where there's 10 or even 12 of them. So you need to be very cautious. When you get through about to the halfway point, you're going to get to a room that has a big just drop in the middle that you can go down into. And down there, you're going to find a terminal. Use that terminal to figure out where all of your resources are and where your data sphere is, because your data sphere can either spawn in the very far back rooms, or it can spawn around the midpoint. And if it spawns around the midpoint, You don't want to even touch the back rooms because that's just more risk you don't need. Once you find the data sphere though, you're not done and you shouldn't pick it up. Picking up that data sphere will cause an error alarm to go off. But this error alarm is a shadow error alarm. So 3 shadow strikers approximately every 30 seconds. So you're going to need to do a little bit of preparation before you pick that thing up and make your final dash back to extraction. Before you pick up that data sphere, make sure everybody knows the way out of zone 241 because there are quite a few twists and turns you're going to have to go through, and it's very dark, so it's not going to be very easy for you to see your way out of there. Then make sure you understand the way back. Now when you get to zone 10, there's a lot of different doors that could be left open or shut. I recommend shut every single door except for the path you take. Now it doesn't really matter which route you take, as most of them will just get you to the same place in about the same amount of time. Just make sure that you know which route you're going to take and shut every single other door, that way when shadows spawn to the left and to the right of you, they have doors they have to break down to actually get to you. Same thing with zone 241. When you're leaving it, shut the doors behind you so any waves that spawn behind you take even longer to get to you. Shadow strikers are a bit slower than regular strikers, so if you have even 1 or 2 doors blocking them, you'll be able to gain so much distance on them you probably won't see them at all until you get to extraction. Now once you shut every single door and you know the route you're going to take, everybody's going to have their own job. Obviously somebody's got to carry the data sphere, so they're not going to really be able to do much on the way out. Your biotracker person should be paying attention to the front of you and the back of you. Make sure you know when enemies are coming, don't ping blindly, wait until the group gets close to you, then ping them, and the person who has a data sphere, don't drop it. Since they'll only be coming in about 3 at a time, it should be very easy for the biotracker person to ping them, and then the biotracker person along with the other 2 people can just shoot them, kill them, and you can keep on moving. If they spawn behind you, do not pay attention to them, just keep moving. Keep an eye behind you in case they do end up catching up to you, but don't worry too much about it. Don't try to clear out every single shadow striker on the way out. Once you make it all the way back to extraction, put the data sphere into the extraction scan and you have to hold out there. Just like earlier though, this is going to cause an actual alarm to go off, so now you're going to have waves of regular strikers coming in after you. The good thing though is because of how many shadow strikers have spawned in up to this point because of that error alarm, you probably won't see any regular strikers until you actually kill off some of the shadow strikers, which is good because the shadow strikers are coming in waves of 3 while the regular strikers are coming in waves of like 7, 8, 9, or even 10. When you're holding out on the extraction scan, again, biotracker person ping them, but wait until they get close. Do not ping the second you can. I've said it so many times already in this video, but I cannot say it enough. You do not want to ping prematurely and only tag 1 or 2 of them while there's another 10 or even 15 behind those 2 that didn't get tagged because you waited too, or you did it way too soon. This extraction scan won't take too long for you, and if you shut enough doors behind you, you'll probably get it up to about 50% before the shadows even start appearing. But once you get that scan up to 100%, you are done with R4C2 and you have now beaten this level on prisoner efficiency. And there you have it. In all honesty, R4C2 isn't really that difficult of a level once you start understanding how it works and you get familiar with the new or returning mechanics. Shadow Scouts, Shadows, and Surge Alarms are pretty difficult if you've never dealt with them before, but once you start getting familiar and you come up with good strategies with your own group and you have a good idea of how to handle them, it's really not too bad overall. But as always, if you have any tips or tricks for this level that you want to share, any questions for me, or you just have something in general that you want to say, leave it down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, then consider hitting that like button. It does help out the channel quite a bit, and it helps these videos get noticed by people who really need them. And if you want to become part of this community, then hit that subscribe button and ring that bell to get notified whenever I post a new video. Until next time, look towards the future, enjoy the brand new year, and I'll see you all in the next video.